Let me pitch you a manga really quick. A 27-year-old Japanese English teacher is haunted by the ghost of Jimi Hendrix and is told if she doesn't become a legend by her 28th birthday, she will die and join the 27 Club. Have I sold you yet? A little while ago, I talked about my favorite anime out there, but neglected to mention manga much. Manga is a medium I honestly kind of prefer to anime most of the time. I find it way more engaging and a lot less tedious to consume, and as a comic artist myself, I definitely find a lot more to appreciate with manga, and honestly graphic novels as a whole. And when it comes to the anime fandom zeitgeist online thing, I definitely feel there are some really underappreciated mangas out there. Ever heard of Swans in Space? Yeah, no one has, it's okay. And there is one manga that I am so surprised isn't talked about more. I found it on a whim and I was blown the fuck away by it. Shiori Experience. That pitch I mentioned a second ago, that's all real. This is a real manga that is really Jimi Hendrix mentioned by name. There's a lot to this series, and we're going to get into it and why I feel you should know about it. It's a bizarre, creative, beautiful, hilarious, heartfelt love letter of a manga. So let's jack in. I swear that will make sense as soon as I reference it to the manga, trust me. Shiori Experience is a story about pursuing your passion, regardless of how much gets in your way. It's about how you can find others who will support you along your journey, and this is all told through the power and connection of music. The plot revolves around 27-year-old Shiori Honda, an English teacher at Mitsubishi High, and yes, the car company puns will continue to happen. Shiori lives a pretty stepped-on and boring life, not having much ambition or drive. On her way home from work one day, lightning strikes and she's confronted by Jimi Hendrix. Well, kind of. Like the ghost of Jimi Hendrix, I guess. He tells her because she signed the Crossroads contract, she has to become a legend before she turns 28 or she'll die. Shiori does not remember signing this contract, but it's kinda too late. She's stuck with the contract, and more importantly, she's stuck with Jimi, who can jack in on the back of Shiori's neck and basically control her, letting him play guitar through her. Through some circumstances, Shiori is reminded how much she loves guitar. As a teenager, her brother left her family to pursue music, never returning and leaving them with a ton of debt. Because of that, her father has become really cynical to band and music culture, especially guitar, but her brother was a huge inspiration to Shiori, and she learned to love everything about guitar from him, even starting a little band in high school. And the story revolves around Shiori starting a new band on the road to become a legend by the end of the year. The premise itself really hooked me when I first started reading this. It's bizarre, but oddly grounded as well. The struggles of pursuing your dreams and the loneliness of going against the grain is so palpable in this series, and very relatable. There's a lot of really honest and truthful writing in the characters. They feel real. Not like plot-relevant real, just like real people. As you would probably guess, as Shiori assembles her band, each of them have a story and a journey expressing their passion. And as you probably also guessed, they're unbelievably well told. So many amazing moments with these characters. You really want to see them express themselves, and when they finally do, it's just so damn satisfying. Even the characters beyond the main band members have a lot of emotionally impactful stories. It might sound cheesy, but it's genuinely inspiring. You can tell the mangaka Yuko Osada could really express himself through these characters. Being a musician is being an artist, and I'm sure many of us see ourselves in that, even if we don't play an instrument. So let's start with Shiori. As I said before, she comes off as a little wishy-washy and boring, but her drive and passion is so charming. It's near impossible not to root for her. You never even really feel her reasoning for doing what she's doing is because of the contract. It serves more as a catalyst to pursue music. Her really polite and down-to-earth personality is paired with her immovable determination really well. She's a badass, but she doesn't really come off as one, which is undoubtedly the most satisfying way to write a badass. Also, her design is just like perfection. I am an absolute sucker for simplistic character designs, and this is one of my favorite examples. It gives so much freedom to the mangaka to widen the scope of her expressions and posture. I hate to nonsensically gush so early in this character discussion, but she's kind of like the perfect protagonist. She's such a great example in so many ways. But what about her students/bandmates? We have Isuzu, who is a klutzy, silly saxophone player who was kicked out of the school orchestra. She's adorable and very, very realistic take on this sort of blindly optimistic teenage girl. She loves saxophone, but has an insane amount of self-doubt about her abilities as a musician. It's put to a head quite a few times, and it's always so relatable. Making art with your own hands is very hard and very vulnerable. Her character captures the anxiety that goes along with that so well. There's Daiba, an ex-baseball star who chooses to play drums in Shiori's band at the expense of his baseball career. And oh my god, Daiba is so fucking good. His story is one of my favorites, and his relationship with his passions is just stupidly realistic. There's this inherent trade-off you make when you decide to make something you love for fun a full-blown passion project. You basically make it your personality, alienating yourself from people who might not understand. You risk disappointing people who have certain expectations of you, but Daiba shows that your life and what you love to do is what you should be pursuing, despite what anyone says. There's this really sweet scene when you first meet him where his baseball friends are kind of picking on these manga nerds, but Daiba kind of longingly stares at them. Those manga nerds were loving what they love and being themselves, even though it wasn't a favorable look to their classmates. Something Daiba obviously was very jealous of despite the bullying. So later, Daiba actually approaches them and asks them to recommend a manga sometime, kinda symbolizing his growth. And his journey on becoming a better drummer is one of my favorites too. When I was younger, I was actually a pretty active drummer, and as I was learning, I felt a lot of what he was feeling. Drums can so easily feel like they only have this loose, just have fun with it kind of playstyle to them, but understanding and being a skilled drummer is intense work. I don't think I ever reached the understanding of the craft like Daiba does, but it was really relatable regardless. He's also just this heart of gold hard ass, a guy who I probably would have low-key had a crush on in high school. The singer, Meguru, and the keyboardist, Shinobu, are a really unlikely duo, but they have this really, really sweet backstory. Meguru is this delinquent girl who is very, very stubborn and harshly spoken, but beyond passionate and determined. Her dad was a criminal and ended up painting her in this bad light because of it. It made everyone terrified of her despite not even knowing her. Her story has a lot of great theming about judging people unfairly and how that can manifest a person's toxic personality. She's a product of bullying, resulting in a constant disdain of her environment and everyone around her. But being surrounded by people who understand her let her comfortably be herself and show that she's actually super sweet and caring. Her friend Shinobu is this wacky, occult-loving certified weird girl, and she's awesome. She's kind of the perfect juxtaposition to Meguru. Shinobu is unapologetically unique and doesn't blink an eye at the judgment she receives from it. And despite her sorta dreary and scary look, she may be the most positive and level-headed one in their group. We love Shinobu. There are others that have amazing stories revolving around their band, but I kinda would be here all day if I listed them all. Even some antagonistic characters end up having really empathetic stories. Everyone really just feels human. You have a genuine understanding of their motivations to their struggles, and it rings even truer as an artist of any craft. I also want to say that the way these characters bounce off of each other feels so genuine. I feel some stories with a squad, like a RPG party or a band in this case, can feel a little disconnected if not written thoroughly enough, but Shiori and her bandmates are so well realized and they end up feeling like such a squad. They have a motherfucking squad dynamic. It's so good. And really wholesome. I feel it's not really common to have the teacher as the main character and her students be the ones to push her towards her passions. It's a really cute and refreshing take on this kind of story. And their story together, like as a band, is powerful. Understanding what it means to be a band and the struggles and vulnerabilities that come with it, there's this amazing little arc where they are all filled with an insane amount of inspiration and decide to write a song. They have a ton of fun writing it, and they're given the opportunity to open for a local band. They take up the opportunity to show off their newly created song that they worked so hard on, and they had a blast making together. Aww. And nobody jives with it. They're basically treated to the awkward silence of disinterest and passing criticisms and comments about how mediocre they are. It's crushing for them. But also maybe the most eye-opening push any of them have had about creating art. It's a harsh and exhausting and sometimes a very crushing way of life. Nothing feels worse than feeling you're your only fan. Welcome to the hell called creation, Shiori. It's not only relatable, but also really inspiring to see a series talk so candidly about creating art like this. It's honestly just really, really amazing as an artist, and very important as an artist in my opinion. If you can't tell, the manga is super character focused, first and foremost. And luckily, it sorta gets a perfect score in the character writing department. Sorta. So let's talk about probably the elephant in the room, Jimi Hendrix. Jimi is a huge part of this manga, and you can tell was a huge inspiration when creating it. There is this nerdy aura with all the music history they talk about in this series. The mangaka definitely knows his stuff. Jimi's likeness and mannerisms are captured super well. but he's kinda characterized a little strangely. Now granted, I'm not the most versed in Jimi Hendrix lore, but I have watched plenty of interviews of the guy and didn't really ever get this arrogant, hard-assed, rude, and abrasive vibe from him. Hendrix always seemed pretty humble in his interviews, but this Jimi, he basically sees himself as like the god of the guitar world. He has this kind of strange sexual love for guitar that I think was probably influenced by some of the more sensual lyrics in some of his music, but it comes off as a little creepy sometimes. And while I do think most of these liberties make for a more fun character in the context of this story, there is a weird feeling when the story is basically geeking out about the legacy of these musicians, but portraying them as sort of a caricature of themselves. This is very, very relevant when you meet Kurt Cobain. Cobain I am much more familiar with. He was a really complicated and conflicted man, but the way they characterize him is kind of embarrassing, and maybe slightly in bad taste. They make him constantly depressed and awkward, but having this like puppy dog-like innocence and excitement when it comes to guitar and such. Like, I get it, it's a caricature, like I said, but it comes off closer to like a robot chicken skit of Cobain rather than like a real understanding of him as a person. I did like how they displayed him and Nirvana's backstory, especially with Smells Like Teen Spirit. That song alone has a ridiculously interesting story behind it. There's also this like fanficky feel to how they write them together, like some alternative rock nerd who wanted to write an excuse to have Kurt Cobain and Jimi Hendrix play each other's music and wear each other's clothes. I think the premise and implementation of these legendary musicians is super cool and elevates the story a ton, but the way they're characterized is strange sometimes. Luckily, it's not the main focus, and if you don't know much about these guys, it probably won't even bother you too much. At least they capture their likeness pretty well in the art. Speaking of the art, I can't even begin to explain how good this manga looks. So let me begin to explain really quick. It may be one of my favorite looking mangas ever. The character designs and expressions are top-notch and go an insanely long way in conveying the feelings and vibes they want to evoke. It's artsy and different in so many ways, panel layouts and compositions that genuinely, and I don't say this with hyperbole, jump off the page. And don't even get me started on the performances. The way this mangaka brings a performance to life only through visuals is like beyond insane. Not only can you see how intensely the characters are playing their instruments, but they do an amazing job conveying the emotions the song is creating as well. Explosions of passion, the intensity making the floor shatter, waves of emotion crashing down, and even the sound cutting through characters like a knife is all visually portrayed in just perfect accuracy. There's an insane amount of skill and passion you feel with every panel, I'm not kidding. It reflects the themes of the story so well, the emotions feel so much more palpable when the art complements them so perfectly. You know, I see a lot of people talk about how badly they want this series to be turned into an anime, but I don't really agree at all. A huge, very impressive element to this series is its ability to make you basically hear and feel the music with the visuals alone, and unless the anime is like silent, it would lose that element of its identity. So many amazing, jaw-dropping, full-page shots. It's probably the most emotional I've ever been reading a manga due to this element alone. It's probably one of my favorite mangas to reread just to dissect the visuals. I even own a few volumes physically just to stare at the pages not on a screen. Also, the volume covers are so fucking good, I can't get enough of these. Shiori Experience has been a transformative piece of media as an artist. It's beyond inspiring, it's powerful, it has such an important sense of thematic relevance in my life. Being an artist, pursuing your passions, and being able to connect to like-minded people has been a huge part of my journey as an artist. Seeing a mangaka share their artistic journey through completely different circumstances, and it rings so true to my life, makes for such a valuable piece of media for me to experience. It really just shows how powerful and transformative that journey is. You may be surprised at how I'm describing this series after hearing the premise at the start of this video, but I think that's kind of by design. There's this immediate sense of bizarre creativity the series throws at you, and I think that really does do a lot in terms of helping the more poignant parts of the story shine. So how do you go about reading this? Well, this manga has been going on since 2014, and there's no way in hell it'll be licensed officially over here. The entire series' backbone is based on licensed names and music labels. The licensing laws for music are much different in Japan, but in America, they are all owned by different publishers, rights holders, companies. To pay for all of those differing licenses on a niche manga series from a decade ago might not be an easy sell. But luckily, there's been people translating it, and they're doing a great job. There's a lot of good notes in the translation that give a lot more context, and clever use of formatting and fonts to differentiate what languages are being spoken. They took a break a while ago, but recently, they've been delivering regular updates. Unfortunately, it's not really even close to being caught up with the current Japanese volumes, and the manga's still ongoing, so you won't exactly get a conclusive story here, but what's out there, even in English, is more than enough, and has been enough to completely solidify this as one of my all-time favorite comic series. If this has all sounded any bit appealing, I highly recommend finding some scans online and giving it a shot. I feel its premise and style is something that a lot of people, especially artists, would really eat up, but it's like barely talked about or known over here. Hopefully I did any little bit of a job changing that. Shiori Experience is worth jacking into. See, it makes more sense now, right? Because the whole Jimi Hendrix jacking in thing. Just read the damn manga.